In fact, when I think about emergency, and today because that's a topic that I have been asked to speak on, I think the most important part of the emergency for me today is that the realization that this was a challenge for the nation in a very different way than when it was founded. And when I think back about what has happened, I think we are facing another challenge today. Not the same, but also something very fundamental to what the Indian nation is to be. For those who may think, and I understand why they should think so, those who think Indian nation somehow came out of the independence struggle and it was something which was a given, that it somehow was there. And therefore, when India became free, the fact that an Indian nation got constituted is not the issue. What they don't realize, and that's not surprising, because that kind of history we haven't really thought about, is that when nations emerged, essentially the blueprint was supposed to be Europe. We all thought European nations were essentially the blueprint based on which other nations would emerge. Well, there's a very significant difference between European nations and what happened to countries like India. The European nations, though they talk about the various histories that they had, really came out of linguistic nationalism and two world wars. I will not talk about the earlier wars. It was hundreds of years of war that was taking place in Europe. But two major world wars started based in two European countries, essentially France and Germany. And what was it on? It was the province of Alsace-Lorraine, which was half German-speaking, half French-speaking. Should it go to France or should it go to Germany? And the bloodbath of the two world wars really took place on this issue. Now, what is the significance of this? That the attempt to create homogeneous nation states is what is the earmark of European nationalism. Whether you take German nationalism of the Hitler variety, or you take the two world wars fought, whether France or Germany would own that little piece of land, which had 50% population of both. This were essentially an attempt to think of nation states as homogeneous entities which would be based on linguistic identity. Now, when we talk about the rest of the world, this is not the picture you get. Why? Because we came out of our struggle against colonialism. We fought against colonial powers, and the national identities of almost all the countries that we can talk about came out of national liberation struggles of various kinds. We did not have the luxury of Europe to fight 200 years, even longer probably, 200 years at least of bloodbaths in order to create nation states. We didn't have that luxury. Our unity was based on anti-colonial struggles of the people, diverse people, different areas had different battles. Burma, Myanmar is still going through that battle. Again, different linguistic groups, ethnic groups. How do you constitute a nation? I think the great significance of the Indian nation was that it could build the concept of a nation which was not based on a certain kind of homogeneity. Put everybody in the same basket and make them look and speak the same, but out of recognizing diversity of India and the ability to build a nation out of this diversity. As I said, the European Union, which now claims to be a union, not a nation, realized after 2 world wars that this is not a very good way of doing things. And therefore, they tried some economic unity first, and as you know, they're still trying to make the European Union work. It's not really working. So I think the first great challenge we as India faced, neither emergency then or emergency now, but how to create the nation from the struggle that we had against the British. And of course, not one nation, finally 3 nations came out of this. India and Pakistan initially, then Pakistan and Bangladesh. And if you take British India, then actually that was larger, included Burma, but it included basically Ceylon, Sri Lanka. This is actually the British colonial India. That was the British colonial India's administration. So the second point, it was not that India was created by the British. No, because Burma was not a part of that India. Sri Lanka was not a part of that India. And of course, we have got 3 states now, but at least 2 came out of the, at that time, out of the decolonization that India underwent. So what really built the unity of India? It was the anti-colonial struggle that built the unity, that built the notion of an India. And I want to put that right in front of us, because when you talk about Indian nation, we must understand that it came out of a national struggle against the British, and our identity emerged from this anti-colonial struggle. That's the same, of course, Pakistan being in one part based on Muslim as the religion, as the identity, doesn't address the fundamental question that if religion is the identity, then why not much larger unity? Why only Pakistan being East and West Pakistan? And of course, the linguistic difference, the identity being different, apart from being more than 1,000 kilometers away, of course, meant that we became 2 countries. Though, ultimately what unites both of them at the moment is probably against Big Brother India. That's what really perhaps has built a certain understanding. But it is very clear that the reason that a section did not want to stay in India was because they did not feel themselves to be a part of what the Indian nation wanted to be. I'm not going into that details, but I'm just trying to tell you that the Indian experiment, the national experiment, was something unique. You don't have any other country which has that many languages, that many religions, that many ethnic differences, identities, all of which still became the Indian nation. This also doesn't take into account that we actually wrote a constitution which tried to embody the values of the national movement. That we, very early recognition that we cannot continue as an independent nation unless we are able to build an independent economy. Therefore, India has to build, and if it has to build an independent economy, it has to build what is called self-reliance. And I am particularly interested in this concept because for a lot of our friends, self-reliance is an economic concept. We should be able to trade properly. We should not be subservient. It's an economic concept. For me, because I am a practicing engineer, I still think of myself as an engineer, though I have become, in the last 10, 15 years, also a journalist, thanks to NewsClick. But I'll come to that story a little later. But I always felt that this part of Indian self-reliance is something that I felt very close to, that we had to create our own ability to compete with the world economically, and that means we had to know what technology is and what new technologies are developing, and we should be able to own that knowledge of new technologies so that we are no longer going to be dependent on other countries. The minute you have dependency, of course, you are opening the way for, again, a colonial conquest of your country, either formally or otherwise. So, the basic issue, therefore, was not simple economic independence, not simple political independence, but also independence to be able to produce what you need based on the knowledge that you have. And I think this is, of course, very fundamental to a Marxist understanding of the world, a Marxist understanding of economy, that ultimately what makes human beings different is we produce for our needs. And when you produce for our needs, we interact with nature, we understand nature, and we also build tools with which we change nature. And therefore, technology is essentially changing nature, which is what production from nature is. Yes, nature gives us everything, but we produce from it with our knowledge and our tools. So this economic development of self-reliance really is underpinned by the struggle for independence in terms of scientific and technological knowledge. I'm not going to go into details about science and technology today, that's not my intention. But my intention is to tell you that the first challenge we as a nation faced was really how to bring these elements together and face the diversity of the country, face the diversity both in terms of language, religion, ethnicity, all of these, and yet build a nation which could be held together. You know, when I was young, the middle class had a fascination for dictatorship. When Pakistan had military dictatorship, the number of middle class people who said, you know, we need dictatorship. These mass of ignorant people in India, they need the stick. It's a very upper caste, upper class view of the world, that the poor, those who work, they don't know. Only we know, because we can read. They don't. So the idea, and this is a very Brahmanical concept in India, of course, that we are superior to them. And this superiority means that this democratic institution of the vote, which gives even the most ignorant peasant the same right as me, the great intellectual me, who's got a degree, BA or something, by which I have now become a babu somewhere, this arrogance is not simply one of class, it's also one of caste in India. And that, of course, is also the reason why these views come up again and again. But it was, from the beginning, very close to the belief that certain select people should rule, and dictatorship is therefore preferable to democracy. This popular vote was something they didn't like. And that's also the other part of it. Let's not forget, popular vote, right to vote to elect your leaders, was relatively recent even in the West. Full, adult suffrage, as it is called, came to England quite late. All of this also meant that our struggle for national identity was also a struggle for democracy. And this is something which a large segment of the people were unaware of its importance. And that is the first challenge to that. Post-independence, we had the challenge of how to build a nation in spite of the riots, the large displacement that took place, the kind of poverty we faced, the kind of economy the British had left for us, only a supplier of goods, primary goods to Europe. All of that, when we faced, we also had to face what in this nation, what is the role of democracy? And I still remember that when emergency was declared, there was a section of the middle class who were happy. They said, right thing. These people, workers, essentially, those who labor, those who comes to your house and does your basic work, these are all ignorant. They need the stick to be told what they should do. That's all. And of course, they took for granted they will wield the stick. And they were on the side of the stick. That is the first time Indian middle class confronts the issue. What happens if the daroga with the stick is more powerful than them? If the lowly policeman can do whatever he wants and there's no protection for you. So class was not going to protect them during emergency. This is a huge shock. I remember post-emergency when people asked, after they had voted, once Mrs. Gandhi lost the election, people were quite articulate. He said, why we did not like the emergency? Because the daroga was more powerful than our sarpanch. Otherwise, the mukhya of the village was the most powerful figure. But now, one policeman could push around our leader. So the democracy which is fundamental to society for them was the fact that they had a voice, not just the administration. They had a voice because they could speak, they had to be heard, and if they were not respected, then they had the ability to change their rulers. So this fundamental sense was what the 19 months of emergency. It was formally lifted in 21 months, but 19 months Mrs. Gandhi lost the election, it was over. And of course, then election, lifting the emergency was formality. So this test that we had during emergency, I'm not going to talk too much about my life personally. I have written a book, so all those who are interested, please read it. There is a Malayalam translation which has also been done, and therefore it's accessible to all of you. So I'm not going to repeat what I've written in the book, in which case there is no interest in buying the book. So I'm going to talk about the issues that we had at that time. That this challenge that the Indian people faced was significant because it taught the leaders one lesson, which the Indian leadership, the political leadership, has not forgotten. Don't take the people for granted. You may believe that they accept what you are saying, but when it comes to the test, then they will express their opinion, and that opinion is not something that the real rulers can really control. So what distinguishes that period of emergency from what is being called, or what I would also call, as an undeclared emergency? undeclared emergency? Because there is an element of fear. There is, not so much in southern states as yet, but certainly in the BJP-ruled states, there is an element of fear. One difference between the emergency then and now is there is a certain kind of mass mobilization in favor of the government, what it does, and also in favor of muzzling the critics. That's very clear that it's not simply the government which is doing it, but there's a whole bunch of people who are writing to the government, oh, put this person in jail because he's saying these things, oh, he's spreading hatred, etc., etc. All of it is to muzzle the people and stifle their voices. All of this is being done, but it is not simply being done by the state. There is also a certain kind of mobilization in favor of doing what the state is doing. So it's a different challenge. I'm going to go into this a little later. But it is also true that there is always the memory which is lost. You forget when you might have gone through an emergency in an earlier period. You forget that people remember. And people will not accept whatever you want to tell them. It's not that they are wise by birth, they're not. But social experience has taught them that giving too much power to your rulers without any lagam, without any control, that is very dangerous to their democratic rights. And I think this specific learning which came out of emergency made people aware of the fact that unless they exercise control over the leaders, then this is something which can be harmful for them. And I think this is one issue that still stands between dictatorship then, stood between dictatorship then and what we had fought and got as an Indian nation, our liberties which are enshrined in the Constitution. This is what stood at that time, and that still stands today. So I would say that what today, when you see the kind of attacks that are there on the people, and it is there in various forms. It's there if you speak out on certain issues, if you criticize the government too much, if you take specific examples of the kind of attacks that are being done, and most of all, if you criticize the government for certain set of companies becoming very rich, while the share of the resources, share of the economy that go to people is not reaching them. We may call ourselves that we are becoming the fourth largest economy with the world. We are overtaking China, etc., etc. We'll become third biggest economy. All those things does not wish away from the fact that you have malnutrition in your people, you have lack of education in society, and the economy is becoming more and more concentrated with billionaires, large number of billionaires and trillionaires now that you are creating, along with people below the poverty line actually growing. It's only the definition of poverty is such that it makes it not so obvious. So if you really take malnutrition, if you take people's literacy, if you take hard parameters like this into account, then we'll find that yes, Indian people, a large section of the Indian people are not benefiting from the development that is there. But yes, the economy is growing, so what's happening? Of course, much larger amount of that money is going to the rich, which middle class also benefits. Certain sections of the middle class do benefit from that. But by and large, the distribution of the economy makes clear that this is a government for the rich. And if there are protests against this, then the government needs various mechanisms to defeat those protests. National interest, talking about language. Hindi is, of course, the one issue which will always be there when we come to South, also in Bengal. Then, of course, religious identity. So these are issues to divide the people so that people do not unite around the fact, okay, you're saying we are developing, we have become the 4th largest economy, we are going to become the 3rd largest economy, all that is fine. But where is that money going? And that fundamental questions, of course, will bring immediately to the forefront. This is a government for the rich. And that is something the RSS has never hidden. It has always said that capitalists know best. The task of the government is to support capitalism. Capitalists, not capitalism, but capitalists. And they will then develop the economy. Now, of course, this is also the neoliberal philosophy, which was Mr. Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh also said, we must let the animal spirits of capital business set free. They will pull up the country. Which Mr. Modi has repeated, that the rich will pull up the poor. It is not trickled down, but apparently the rich will lift up the poor. That's his official statement. So if you take all of that, we are seeing really the fundamental change in the way you define the state. If the Ambedkar's drafted constitution had at the core the issue that we need economic, social, also equality. We need equality not just as citizens, but in terms of law. But those, whatever is given in law, will make sense only when there is economic liberty as well, that you can earn enough to be able to assert your right. Right to education. You have the knowledge to be able to assert your right to equality. And otherwise, it will only be an empty form of equality. This is Ambedkar, not me, saying it. So he was aware of the fact that unless the Constitution is not going to be enough, unless there is also things which make a change in the lives of the people, the constitutional words will remain empty of meaning. And that is the significance of what we are witnessing today, that what the RSS, BJP would like to have is a so-called constitution, but which is essentially robbed of the character that it should be enabling the people to have a better life, enable the people to have better education, be better citizens. Instead of that, it should be used in order to enhance the power of the state and the power of certain section within the state, which then holds that control by virtue of the fact that state power can be used to silence critics, state power can be used to marginalize states like Kerala, make them much more dependent on government, that's their attempt. So essentially subvert what was originally thought of as a constitution which would allow the states a certain degree of power, economic power for developing itself. So make them much more dependent on the center, a centralized state, not a state of all the people. Now this essential challenge is what we also fought during emergency, but at that time there was one significant difference, that the Congress was not interested in polarizing the people in terms of language or religion. This government wants a polarization amongst the people. It's anti-minority in different ways, and therefore create within the majority what's called a majoritarian consciousness. Only they are India, the others are not. And you know, That's one thing which is common with Hitler's Germany and a lot of other attempts which later on also try to become nationalist. That who are the core Germans and who are not, which in Nazi Germany, the Aryan race. It was golden-haired, blue eyes. That was supposed to be the characteristic of the true German. Aryan is what they used to call it. Of course, that again is another history we don't want to get into. But who is a true Indian, therefore, is the issue. And those who might be Indian citizens, but really are not Indians, then becomes an attempt to marginalize them. So I think we have got the third challenge. What I wanted to really talk about is that we have had three challenges. First challenge was how to come out of colonialism and build a national identity. And in spite of the kind of bloodshed we had during the partition, we overcame that. We built a nation state based on solidarity, based on unity in diversity, as it was said, and built a constitution which would allow for people to express themselves, the right to life, liberty, and free speech. All of this, for a backward country, was thought to be something impossible. We did it. And when it was threatened in 1975, during emergency, the Indian people fought back. Fought back ultimately with the ballot box, but they fought back. And let us give Mrs. Gandhi her due. She accepted the value, she had accepted the verdict of the people. And when she fought again in the election, we thought, will she bring back emergency again? Indian people were confident. They could vote her back in the belief that they had taught her a lesson. And she was not going to be able, she will not bring back the emergency again. And they were right. They had taught her a lesson and she had learnt it. Now we face a new challenge. And I think every generation will face a new challenge because memory, unfortunately, fades. In people's minds, new generation comes, they have to learn again. And I think this is the third challenge we face, what kind of Indian nation we want to build. It's not simply about the economy, not simply about industry, but it's about the distribution of wealth in the country. Will we have a country where the benefits of economic development go to the people, and will you have a country where people are able to speak up for their rights? And I think that is the challenge we face today. It's a double challenge. How do you protect India's national identity as a diverse nation? And how do you ensure the development of India's economy reaches all its people, not just a small section? I think that's what is the challenge today. And with this, I'm going to end that I always feel optimistic, even when I was in jail and everybody, a lot of people had given up. They thought that they're going to spend a long time in jail. And I had thought that, we shouldn't think about it. We should always believe that yes, we can change society, and yes, one day we'll be free. And we should be able to fight for our rights. It did happen. So even today, when people are, a lot of our friends are today feeling depressed. They feel, okay, unlike Kerala or some other southern states, they feel that voices cannot be raised, we can't do anything, and they sort of have given up. I think that is the mistake they are making, that Indian people have been able to fight the colonial regime, fight the divisive forces to build an India post-independence, fight the emergency, assert their democratic rights. And today also, when it seems there are divisions, the state is too strong, the capitalists are too big, too rich, I think they are making a mistake. We should never underestimate the ability of the people to fight for their rights and change society. The question is, we should have the patience and the political ability to reach them in a way they would like and be able to change the society. And today, technology, the one which people are holding in their hands right now, has also democratized communication in a way it wasn't before. So every person can also reach other people. Our challenge is not to make this instrument, the cell phone, as an instrument of self-glorification and only talking about what we feel, but also make it as an instrument of organization. And since I'm speaking in AKG Memorial Hall here, I must also say, when Lenin built the Bolshevik Party, he started with the Iskra, the paper. He did not build it so that his articles would be read by all parts of Russia. He built it as an organizer of the Communist Party. The spark, Iskra, was supposed to be an organizer of the Communist Party, printing it, distributing it, taking the facsimile of it to other places, reprinting it there. That was the network which led to the development of the Bolshevik Party, the Communist Party, and that was the intent of Iskra. Today, instead of making this an instrument of, shall I say, a kind of in love with yourself by telling the world what you think, how can we make it an instrument not simply of what we want to say, but as a means of organization, a part of our struggle? How can we talk about, how can we use this instrument? This is also the challenge for all of us. But that's why I say I'm a technologist. So therefore, I also would like to bring to you that social, political work also means an understanding of technology and how you use it. Whether it was Lenin with the printing press, Iskra, or whether it is today. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently.